You ever jumped to a conclusion? Of course you have. We all do, right? It's just a small assumption. Feels so true in the moment. But what if that tiny mistake, that little leap in logic, could spiral out of control and become, well, something truly devastating? Today, we're diving into a story where that's exactly what happens.
I know, it sounds a bit extreme, doesn't it? I mean, how can a single thought, one little assumption, actually lead to murder? Well, we're about to unpack a tragic story from ancient Baghdad that shows us how a flawed way of thinking can be the deadliest weapon there is. All right, so our story kicks off in the bustling, powerful city of Baghdad, and it all starts with what seems like an unbelievable stroke of good fortune. So picture this, a poor fisherman on the banks of the Tigris. He's had a long, fruitless day. Casts his net one last time, and what does he pull up? Not a fish, but a heavy, locked, golden chest. I mean, you can imagine his excitement, right? He's thinking, this is it, treasure. And because he knows his caliph, Harun al-Rashid, is a pretty fair and generous guy, he decides to do the right thing and take it straight to the palace, probably dreaming of a life-changing reward. But when they finally get the chest open in front of the caliph, the whole court just gasps. No jewels, no gold. Inside is the body of a beautiful young woman, murdered. The caliph is just floored. But that shock, it turns to pure rage in a heartbeat. He's thinking, how could this happen in my city, right under my nose? For him, this isn't just a crime, it's a personal insult. So, with his ego completely bruised, the caliph calls in his most trusted advisor, a guy named Jafar, and gives him a totally impossible ultimatum. Find the killer in 3 days, or you'll be executed instead. No pressure, right? The clock is ticking. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, still nothing. By the 3rd day, Jafar has pretty much accepted he's a dead man. Okay, so here's the scene. Jafar is literally about to be executed. The whole city is out watching. And then, just in the nick of time, the story takes this wild, dramatic turn. This is where we get to the real heart of the tragedy. Out of nowhere, a young merchant bursts from the crowd yelling that Jafar is innocent because he's the real killer. And then, right on his heels, an old man, his father, rushes out trying to take the blame to save his son. But the young man is adamant. He says, no, I did it, and he promises to tell the caliph the whole crazy story from the beginning. And what a story it is. He starts by telling them about this deep, profound love he had for his wife. She'd fallen terribly ill, and her only request, her dying wish almost, was for one of these mythical golden apples. You know, the kind that are said to have healing powers. So this guy, he sells everything he owns, goes on this long, dangerous journey, and finally, he finds it, the tree. There are only 3 of these apples in the entire world, and he buys all of them. He rushes home, gives one to his wife, and unbelievably, after just one bite, she starts to get better. But then, the very next day, he's walking home from work, and his whole world just shatters. He sees a slave just standing there, holding one of those identical, unmistakable golden apples. He runs over, completely breathless, and asks him, "Where did you get that?" And the slave, with this lazy, casual smile, delivers the line that kicks off the entire tragedy. He just says, "Oh, this apple? My beloved gave it to me." And right there, in that one single moment, a tiny seed of doubt is planted in his mind. And we're about to watch how that little seed just explodes into a full-blown storm of rage, a storm fueled by pure assumption that ends in an absolutely unthinkable tragedy. What we're seeing here is a perfect psychological domino effect. It starts with one small, meaningless lie. That lie leads to a huge, devastating assumption. That assumption then morphs into this uncontrollable rage, which, of course, leads to murder. And only then, only when it's way, way too late, does the real truth finally surface. So the merchant just bolts home, his mind racing a million miles an hour, inventing this entire story of betrayal and infidelity. He gets there, checks the apples, and sure enough, one is missing. To him, that's all the proof he needs. It confirms his absolute worst fears. He confronts his wife, and she's just completely baffled by his accusations. But her confused denials, to him, they just sound like more lies. You see, he's not looking for the truth anymore. He's just looking for anything that confirms the terrible story he's already decided is true. So after the unthinkable happens, after he murders his wife in his fit of rage and puts her body in that chest, he comes home and he finds his young son crying. And this is when the horrible, devastating truth finally comes out. His son confesses. He says, "Father,
I took one of the pretty apples just to show my friends, but a thief grabbed it from me and ran away.
Can you even imagine? The weight of that realization just comes crashing down on him. His wife was completely innocent. The slave told a stupid, pointless lie, and he, blinded by his own story, had murdered the person he loved more than anything in the world. He just couldn't live with himself, and he certainly couldn't let another innocent person, Jafar, die for what he'd done. And that's why he came forward to confess.
So this story, which comes from the famous collection The 1001 Nights, it isn't just some sad ancient tale. It's really a parable. It's a powerful lesson about how our own minds work, or sometimes how they don't work. So that brings us back to the big question, right? Who was the real killer here? Yeah, the merchant's hands did the deed, but what was the force pushing them? What was the true root cause of this whole tragedy? And this is the absolute key to the whole story. The true villain wasn't just the man, it was his mindset, the way he thought. And what this story suggests is that this kind of reactive, assumption-driven thinking is something that, honestly, 99% of people fall victim to.
When you boil it all down, the root of this entire disaster is one single word: assumption. Believing something is true without a shred of real proof. Think about it. The merchant didn't ask a single follow-up question. He didn't investigate. He heard one casual lie, saw one missing apple, and from those two tiny things, he constructed an entire fatal reality in his head.
And this really breaks down the two opposing ways of thinking. You've got the 99% mindset on one side. We see it in the merchant, the angry caliph, even the slave with his careless lie. This mindset reacts instantly. It jumps to conclusions, it gets its ego involved, it takes everything personally. But then there's the 1% mindset, and it's totally different. It's curious, it's patient, it seeks to understand the full picture before it even thinks about reacting. So, look, the whole point here isn't just to hear a sad story, it's to learn from it, right? So how do we avoid falling into these same traps? How can we actually build that 1% mindset in our own lives? Well, it really boils down to a few core principles. First off, seek clarity. Don't just assume. That means you gotta have the courage to ask questions when you're not sure about something. Second, respond, don't just react. Take that crucial half second, that deep breath, before letting your emotions run the show. Third, and this is a big one, know that your words have real power. The slave's careless lie proves that in a huge way. And finally, learn to be patient. You have to get comfortable with not knowing everything right away. Don't let that uncertainty rush you into a bad conclusion. And all of this leaves us with one last really powerful question to think about. What story are you telling yourself right now without having all the facts? Think about it. In your job, in your relationships, what assumptions are you just accepting as the gospel truth? Because the story of the golden apple is this timeless, crucial warning that the tiny gap between what we assume and what is true, well, that gap can be the difference between love and loss, between justice and absolute tragedy.